work through these. So, first one, what percent? So I'm going to kind of shortcut here a little bit. What percent of 186 is 62? So if I want to do kind of a real quick estimate here, I would think of this as what percent of 180 is 60, and 60 looks like a third of 180, so I would think it should be about 33.33% for my answer. So now if I go back and I do this problem and I set this up, and I'm going to say what percent, so let's call this n, equals, or what percent of 186 is, set this up right, so my percent n times 186 equals 62. The key is always your is. And so that's how I knew after I started that I had set that up wrong, because I was trying to put my equal sign over here on this side, and I shouldn't do that. So my is, it always tells me where the equal sign is on this. So I've got a problem here. I'm going to now divide both sides by 186. Oh, really good calculator problem to do. But actually, I think I can do this in my head, can't I? It looks like these go in exactly even. I think everything, it goes in 62 times, so I'm going to get a third. So I'm going to get exactly my estimate here for my answer. So that turned out to be pretty good, pretty close. All right, let's do the next one. And on B, so this was A, and on B, it says what percent of 90 is 180? And you know what? I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say I don't even need to estimate, because that's going to give me, I'm going to get the same thing with my estimate. So let's just work this problem out and see what we get. So we're trying to get my percent times 90 equals 180. And if I calculate this out and I go 90 here, and these cancel out, this goes in perfectly, so I get 2. Okay, so here we go. N equals 2. Now remember, this is not your answer. N is the decimal of the percent. So you still need to change this to a percent. So here's the decimal place. Because we're going to percents, we've got to move the decimal 2 places and add in those zeros. So this is 200% for that one. All right, let's work E, or C rather, C. Try to do C first. 210 is 75% of what number? All right, so I know you guys did your estimating, and you would have said, probably for the estimate, you would have said, well, 200 is 75% of n, or 0.75 n. And if I kind of think about that, so I'm going to take a number and take 3/4 of that number, 3/4 of my number to get 200. And so I'm going to get like 800 divided by 3. Oh, that's not a real good estimate. I don't like how I got that. But, I can figure it out. It's going to be 2 and, 6, about, 2/3 kind of. So somewhere about 260 some percent is what I've got for that one. So I should get a number in that range, somewhere in that area. Okay, so let's now work through the problem here. All right, so 210 equals 75%, change to a decimal. Remember, change to a decimal, move the decimal place 2 points, okay, times n. And now if I divide both sides by 0.75, and I get, let's see, punch that into my handy dandy calculator, and I get 280. Now that's not bad. It's, I had about 270-ish. So that's giving me a pretty close number. These are simply just make sure that they're close. Most of the time when you get a wrong answer, it's really wrong. And so, your answer, instead of being 280, it'd be like 28. And, if you see 28 and 266, then you should know that, oh, there's something wrong in what I did there. So that's how we use those estimates to kind of figure that stuff out. I'm telling you, the biggest thing about estimates, it will keep you from missing problems. So if your goal on the test is to get them right, the estimates are a great way to get you close to the answer, to make sure that you've got it right. All right, let's take a look at D. 18, this is D, 18% of what number is 54? So if we want to do a real quick estimate, let's think 20% of some number equals 50. And so, this is a fifth. And so my number would have to be 5 times bigger. So about 250 for my estimate here. All right, so let's see how close we were on that. So 18% is 0.18. Move that decimal 2 places. Times, of kind of means times, so we look for a times. A number equals, is always, remember, means equals 54. And if I divide by 0.18 on both sides and punch that into my calculator, I get exactly 300. Now, there's quite a bit of difference there if you look at that. And the reason is because, we brought that one down and this one up, and they kind of made the error go the same way. So we had a pretty big error for kind of our estimate, but still in the right ballpark. Usually, like I said, your answers are off by powers of 10, so you'd get like 30 or 3 or 3,000. And if they're off by that much, then there's a problem. And a lot of times if they're closer than that, you're probably okay. Okay, so on E, E's kind of a little more complicated. We got 0.2% of a number, of what number is 25? So let's just kind of think just through this a little bit. What are we trying to say here? And let's do let's do these a little bit simpler, okay? Because this is kind of confusing to me. So let's just think, if I had 1% of a number and that equaled 25, let's think about what this is saying. That means this number is really, really big, because I could take only 1% of it and get 25. That means it is 100 times bigger than 25. So that's like, 2,500, and that's 1%, not 0.2%. So I'm going to get a number that's probably even 5 times bigger than that, because 1% is about 5 times more than 0.2. So I'm going to get a really big number, like 12,500, when I calculate this out, which of course is what I do get. So I my estimate in this one, kind of figured out my problem here. But let's just work through it anyway, so that you see exactly how to do that. But this one, and you maybe could have stopped at this point with your estimate and said, it's going to be, a lot bigger than this. That would give me at least a clue if I'm going the right direction, versus this kind of a problem, you might actually go the wrong way. So let's figure this out. We got 0.2%, and we got to change that to a decimal. So remember, when we change to decimal, we have to move the decimal place to the left 2 places. That's a really small number. We get 0.002 times my number equals 25. So if I want to figure that out, divide both sides by 0.002. Well, and that goes in there exactly 12,500 times. So you can see, yeah, that's going to be a pretty big number there when we get done. All right, let's work F. And F, we've got 7 is 2.5% of what number? Oh, let's see. This is going to be, if we want to come up with an estimate one, what do we want to say? Let's say that I don't like 2.5% very well. Should we make that, let's make that 3%. That seems like it might be better, and make this 6. 6 is 3% of n. And so if I get 0.03, this is 0.03, and 6 divided by 0.03 would be 200. Okay, that's not a really easy one to estimate. So maybe I almost had more work on the estimate part than on some of the other things. But still, it kind of gives me something to work from to see if I'm in the close area. All right, so let's go ahead and work the problem. So I've got 7 equals, remember, convert this to a decimal. Be very, very careful when you're doing these, especially when you get small percents, because people forget to convert them. And so this is 0.025 times a number. So dividing by 0.025, and what I end up with is, if I calculate that out, n equals 280. Not great, not super, but yet not off by a factor of 10, which usually is pretty good. All right, so just about done. Let's just take a quick look at this last problem here that the book has, and let me go back up the page here. Okay, a television costs $350. If a 7% tax is added, what is the total cost of television? Hey, now this is real life stuff, because we have to pay tax every time we go and buy stuff. You got to do that. So if you go buy a $350 TV, and I think, what is it in Iowa? It is about 7%, isn't it? So if we want to take $350, that's my base. My 7%, move the decimal twice. Okay, so I get 0.07. I'm not sure where they got that. I think that's a typo. So this should be 0.07. And they've got it right over here, but I think they've got it wrong in the book right here. So 0.07 times 350 gives me $24.50. So, here's the bad part. You go, save up your money, you got $350 to buy your TV, and when you go, you got to pay $24.50 more. So it ends up costing you $374.50. The government always wants to get their money. All right, so this is a tougher section. Do not be afraid to do a little more work in this section because it's harder. Don't skip it because it's harder. You should do more because it's a harder section. So you might consider in this one, if you're really struggling with these problems, of doing both things, the worksheet and the pages, because these are definitely more difficult problems. These are the ones that you're more likely to miss on a test when you're doing these types of things. So these are the ones that you need to practice the most, not the least. All right.